Yeah. So welcome to 40 Years On, which is a spotlight, as you would say, on Emmanuel. My name's Lucy and I'm a part of the Emmanuel Media Crew.
The Media Crew is a group of students from all secondary grades. We are learning all aspects of media and we maintain a website where we display all of our work.
And today we're going to be talking to Mr. Dirk Petrusma, the founding principal of Emmanuel, so welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Mr. Owen Wilson, a student from the very early days of Emmanuel, and the current IT manager of CST. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm guessing there wasn't anything that fancy at Emmanuel back in the day, Mr. Petrusma.
Sorry, say again?
I'm guessing there wasn't anything that fancy back in the day, Mr. Petrusma.
Oh, we had fancy, yeah. We had a paddock. We had a gravel road that came in from, and I noticed this morning that Chipman Road has been finally dealt with. But we had a gravel driveway into the school, which was the current, I guess, kinder prep, and half of that building over there, that infant block. And I have a big memory that the metro bus used to come and pick the kids up. And we had a great rainfall, and he tried to go off the gravel. Well, he did go off the gravel and got stuck. So we had a big metro bus stuck in the mud over near what are the netball courts or the basketball courts today.
Well, that sounds riveting. Speaking of back in the day, in a couple of minutes, could you tell us about what it was like to be principal of Emmanuel 40 years ago?
What it was like to be principal?
Yes.
Well, it's a tough question because I had never been a principal before. I was only just 32 years of age, so I was young. I had two little kids, two children, who were, I think, 6 and 2 at the time, and but it was a calling. I remember way back in 1978 that God made a distinct call on my life to come. And I still remember the very first, the beginning of 1979, and I remember being here on a day where I was getting the classroom ready, which was a corridor. Okay, that was my first class with 17 girls and boys from years 3 through to 6. And I wrote on the board a verse from the book of Isaiah, chapter 30, which said that in quietness and confidence shall be your strength. What was it like to be a principal? It was tough because I had to teach 100% of the time, as well as get a little school off the ground, 35 boys and girls, with my co-teacher, Mrs. Ren Knibber, whichever dialect you want to take. She was Mrs. Nib. Sorry, Matthew, wherever you are.
Well, I'm sure you did a good job.
Mr. Wilson, what was your most memorable moment as a student at Emmanuel?
A lot of memorable moments. I remember my first day was very good. I was given a buddy student to work with. I'm still good friends with that person. You'd remember Grant Medwin. So I was partnered up with him. That was a memorable day, and Grant managed that day very well. And so that's why I remember teaching was always very important, to pair the new students up with somebody who was going to do that job well. The first day of high school, we had stools, we were in the science lab, but we didn't have any desks. They hadn't arrived, but it didn't matter. Learning happened anyway. So, and that was one of the other memories I think of Emmanuel. It was a large class, and we certainly didn't have the facilities that are here now. But I don't feel, reflecting back on my education, I don't feel like I missed out on anything. We still experienced a great deal and learnt a lot while we're here too.
Can I say something about this guy?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
I taught him in grade 5, I taught him in grade 6, I taught him in special maths in the high school at one stage, in my office with a couple other guys, and then Owen went and did education, and he came and did his internship at Emmanuel, and I actually supervised that, wrote a fantastic report, and before the internship was finished, I said, I want to employ you as a teacher at Emmanuel, and he's come on board, and he's been here ever since. Not bad?
So, Mr. Petrusma, how long were you in charge, and what were some of the highlights of that time?
Well, I was here for 21 and a half years as a school principal. So from 1979 to the 14th of July 2000. There are so many highlights. There are some lowlights as well. I often say the kids were the most pleasant to deal with. The staff probably were a little behind them, and the parents were most difficult. No, there were lots of treats, highlights. To see new buildings come. I reflect back to 1979, and I'd drive in through a rusty old gate at the Chipman Road, and there was a great big billboard showing what the school was going to look like when it was completed, with all the buildings that the architect had designed. And I used to look at that, particularly as I drove home, because I'd see it as I drove home at the end of the long day, and I would wonder, and I would say, Lord, is that ever going to be possible? Here we are with 35 boys and girls. Is it ever going to be possible that we will see a school mushroom to the extent that it is today? And today is a revelation of God's goodness and graciousness and faithfulness in bringing about what you young people are now blessed to receive. Highlights, it's exciting to talk about kids. Seeing Karina up there, Mrs. what's her name? Vanderclay. I taught Karina in year 1, 79. She was in my grade 3, along with the son of the Bethlehems that I think are sitting over there. I can hardly see anybody, but Hank and Geese and Bethlehem's son Ken, and another young lad called Sasha, 3 children who I taught in year 3, 4, 5 and 6. I was their only primary school teacher. I don't know if that was a highlight for them or not, but I have very fond memories and developed a beautiful relationship with them. They did all right, because at least 2 of them went on and got university degrees, so I thought I couldn't have done such a bad job. So seeing Karina up on the screen now, who's actively involved in the life of our schools, is a highlight.
Very good.
Mr. Wilson, what were your most valuable life lessons from your time at Emmanuel?
I was actually reflecting on that last night after you asked it yesterday in the rehearsal.
You're ahead of me. I don't know any about these questions.
I like that. Yesterday I was actually sitting right there. And I think that unique sort of experience of always being the oldest grade, because going through high school there was no grade older because it was the first year group through. I think that sort of fostered some opportunities that maybe wouldn't normally exist. We're always helping the younger students. We're always sort of assisting and things like that. And that sort of awoke something in my heart that I always wanted to be that in that sort of role, assisting people, teaching people, and probably was quite influential on the path that I ended up taking. So, yeah.
And can I just add to that, because there was a big struggle at Emmanuel to start as high school. And a lot of parents were really finding it hard because they wanted their children to continue into high school here. And as it turns out, a lot of our students were going to Calvin, but also back into the state system or other private schools. And so we had parents here who fought really hard. And in the end, it was a wonderful occasion when we were able to start our first high school. In 1988, there were 30 students, and you were one of them, Owen. And the picture went in the Mercury of a number of students without desks that you mentioned before. So that's again another highlight. And then we saw new buildings being added over every few years as well. So,
Mr. Petrusma, you were the very first principal at Emmanuel. Apparently the students weren't as well behaved back then. Is this true?
Well, look, all I can say to you is that if I was visiting a classroom and I could see through the windows, if they saw me coming, they would straighten up very quickly. I only know that you never appreciate it until you leave, right? And I know that after I left, I know I had a lot of students come to me and say, "We miss you." And that was a wonderful affirmation. We had our moments. We've had times where little boys were smoking down in the creek, and we had to deal with that. We had times where children were frustrated and found it difficult to stay, and I remember going out in the car and finding some of our students, one at a time, walking the streets of Rugby and getting them in the car and sitting down with them and working through what the issues were. And the key to all that was to be godly and to seek God's engagement in their lives, so they knew the reality of Jesus and that he would be working and walking with them through whatever the problems might be. It doesn't matter what period of time you're in. Students are going to be students, but they're great learning experiences. Can I tell you one experience we had with some high school students? It was an alcohol problem.
Oh.
Okay, and it was a social between Calvin and Emmanuel down at Kingston, and some of the grade 10s from Emmanuel and Calvin actually ended up drinking after the social, but they were caught, and we thought, now what do we do? Well, what we did is my head of secondary at the time, Mr. Hanson, said, I've got a suggestion. We're going to ask every parent, mum and dad of every student to come in. We are only dealing with the Emmanuel kids, not the Calvin kids. And so some of the parents said, well, we can't come because I've got this. And then Mr. Hanson said, no. If your child is the most important person in your life, you will be there at 5 o'clock on that particular day. So they all assembled in the staff room, and each student came into my office, and present in my office was the principal of Calvin, the head of secondary at Calvin, the head of primary, and the parents. And the student had to come and confess and seek forgiveness of those 6 adults. Then they all went through that process, and there might even be a couple of parents right here who might remember this. I'm not going to point the finger because I can't see anybody out there. And then we all went back to the staff room, and we as a staff said, you are forgiven. God's got a new day ahead of you. Start anew fresh tomorrow. And those kids turned out to be fantastic. So we learn from our mistakes, we learn from our experiences, and that's what I think somebody referred to before.
Sounds like a party.
Mr. Wilson, did you ever have to go to the principal's office, and what was Mr. Petrusma like as the principal?
I might answer that question in reverse. Mr. Petrusma was a very good principal. I guess I experienced Mr. Petrusma as my principal and also as the principal while I was an employee here as well. So in both capacities, he was excellent. I was thinking, I must have visited a lot of principals' offices while you were here. I can think of at least 3, I think, in the primary block, and for a little while you were in the secondary block, yes. And then over in the one here. But my favourite visit was the one when I got called into the principal's office in what is now the admin building, and you offered me that job that day. So that was probably my most memorable visit to the principal's office. It was never for being naughty. Never.
There were a number of offices. The first office was in the storeroom in what is the infant block. That was number 1. Then, of course, in what is now the primary block, a small office. And then I went to the secondary homeroom block, and then finally to the administration centre.
Nice. Mr. Petrusma, what was your most memorable alumni story from someone who has contacted you about their life since going to Emmanuel?
Oh, there have been some wonderful stories. I know a young man called Stuart Middleton who was in your class but didn't go on into the high school. And I got a letter from Stuart when he was doing, I think, his PhD at university. And he wrote to me a private letter and said to me how, as he reflected on his life, how much Emmanuel meant to him and had grounded him in values and in Christian ethics. And he obviously was very kind in his remarks to me in terms of, I taught him for a couple of years as well.
Mr. Wilson, how was God faithful to you through your years at Emmanuel?
I don't think that was in yesterday's questions, but it's a good one. Sneaky one. Well, God was very faithful. I remember feeling being challenged in my teaching capacity. It was 1999. Don Hanson, the head of the secretary, was booked to go on what was the first Fiji trip. I think you were principal then, and Don suffered an injury, couldn't go, and so at the last minute he said, "Oh, can you go?" And I'd only just started teaching. I'd been teaching for a few years, and I was very comfortable doing what I was doing. And I was going, "What do you mean you want me to get on a plane with probably 30 odd students and go to a foreign country?" And so I was a little bit worried about that, and so I needed to seek God's wisdom and guidance. And I said, "If you want me to do this," because it was only a little bit optional, I was kind of being told to go. But anyway, that was an amazing trip, and it really opened the door to a whole lot of mission-based ministry that I've been able to do both in Fiji a number of times with Emmanuel and Thailand through church and things like that. So that's probably my best example of that.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Mr. Petrusma, do you have any words of wisdom for the current staff at Emmanuel?
Words of wisdom for the current staff. Well, first of all, it's perhaps not just wisdom, it's just practicality. Be faithful in your calling, if God has called you, and it's not just a job. If teachers are here just because it's a job, I would question why they're here. First of all, it's a calling, that they are faithful in their relationship with Jesus, that they are faithful in their commitment to being part of a body called the church. I don't hold back. I feel sad that there are too many Christians who don't see any real importance for being in fellowship and worshipping with God's people, and that would be my guidance to any person, but particularly teachers who are to set the example to young people and children to be godly in their behaviour, to be godly in their commitment, and that they know that without the Lord in the journey, it's not going to be quite what it should be. So my greatest advice to teachers is fulfil your God-given calling as a mission in a wonderful workplace.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Wilson, do you have any advice for the current students of Emmanuel?
I do. I cheekily said yesterday, be good to your mum and dad, but that is good advice. But I think it's really important to just both work hard at school, but also cherish your time at school. It's a time of your life that sort of you rarely get to repeat, and the friendships and the opportunities to learn, not just about maths and all the other bits and pieces in the curriculum, but to learn how to be a good person and a valuable person is really important. It's hard to revisit that as an adult. So yeah, grab every opportunity that you can.
Thank you. Thank you for coming down today for the interview. Sorry it was a bit on the spot, Mr. Petrusma.
No problem.
And thank you all for sticking with us for the interview, everybody.
Yay!